Hello, today we are on the 19th question of the LeetCode Advanced SQL 50 list. This is number of calls between two persons. Now they give us one table for this question. It's this table called calls here. Essentially what we have here is a list of people that are calling, a list of people that are receiving calls, and how long that phone call was. For example, we have this person, number one, whoever that is, called number two, and this phone call was 59 minutes long. Then person number two called number one back, and the phone call was 11 minutes long. We just have a big list of people calling others and how long that phone call was. And this is all they give us. We want to find how many times two people called each other and how long their total phone calls were. So let's go through an example to better understand what they want. We're going to want to have the person who called or received the call, doesn't matter. This is like the first person in the call. We're going to have the other person in the call. So essentially what these two will represent are the two people who talk to each other. Then for each pair of people that had a phone call, we want to find out how many times they spoke with each other, like how many calls they had. And then we also want to find how long they spent on the phone in minutes. So let's go through an example. We have four people here in this table. Somebody number one, we have person number two, person number three made a few calls, and we also have a person with ID number four. First, we want to find how many times one spoke to two. They called here, right? One called two here, and then two called one here. So they spoke to each other two times. And how long were those phone calls? 59 plus 11, that is 70 minutes. Now let's go to the next pair of people. We have one spoke with three. How many times did one and three call each other? Just once. And how long was that phone call? 20 minutes. And now we have our last pair of people who had calls with each other. We can see person number three called person number four three times, and then person number four called person number three back once. So we're going to have person number four and person number three, right? They had four calls together, and how long were their calls? This adds up to 999 minutes. Now, this is nearly our desired result. Up till now, I told you that the order of person one and person two doesn't matter. However, in the question, they do mention they want us to order it so that the ID of person one is less than person two. What this basically means is, instead of just putting one here and two here at random, if we have two people, we want to put the person with the smaller ID into this one. So here it's correct because one is less than two. Here it's also correct because one is less than three. But here we want to switch the people around because, right, 4 is bigger than 3. So let's just flip that around. This is now our desired output. And that's it. How do we solve this? Now, at first glance, you may notice that we need to use aggregate functions, right? We want to count how many times two people called each other. So we're going to want to potentially perform a count. And then we also are going to want to find how long the phone calls were, add up all the time of the phone calls for each pair of people. So we may want to perform a sum on this column to find how long each person spent with another person on the phone. Now, we want to find these two for each pair of people. This is 3 and 4 talking. That's a pair of people, 3 and 4. We're going to want to perform the count on this, how many rows there are, and then we're going to want to sum these, right, to get how long they were on the phone together. In the same way, we have another group, 1 and 2. They had 2 phone calls together. We want to count how many rows there are, 2, and then sum how long they spent on the phone together, right? But then our last group will be 1 and 3. Now, the problem with this is you may notice that we can't really group that way at this point. For example, in this case, the 3s are in this column, but the ID 3 is in this column. So SQL won't be able to group them because it'll go and see these are 3s and this is a 4. Turn this into a separate group, and these are 4s and these are 3s. This will be a separate group. So instead of having this one big orange group like we want, where 3 and 4 called each other, it's going to split it into these 2 smaller groups where it's 3 and 4 here, and then 4 and 3 here. And then in the same way here, instead of having this one green group, it'll make a group here, 1 and 2, and it'll think 2 and 1 is another group. How do we circumvent that? What we can do is take all the people who called and put them into a list. So we're going to take 1, 2, 1, 3, 3, 3, 4, and we're going to put who they called. This guy called 1, 3, 4, 4, 4, 3. So we just took exactly what we had here. What we're going to do now is take these people who received the calls and attach it to the bottom of this list of people who sent calls. So we're going to add 2, 1, 3, 4, 4, 4, 3. And in the same way, we're going to take the people who called them, so these people, and put it here. At this point, you may still be confused. Why are we doing this? Notice what we have. We have a list of every pair of people who spoke on the phone, but they appear twice. First, they appear as 1 called 2, and then they appear as a duplicate as 2 received a call from 1. We essentially have all of our phone calls just duplicated in a different order. And this is the interesting part. What we're going to do now to remove duplicates is remove the ones where it's higher in this one than this one. So see how it's 4 called 3? We want to remove that because the 4 is bigger than 3. So here 2 is bigger than 1, remove that. 3, 4. The 4 is bigger than 3, remove that. 2 bigger than 1, remove this, remove this, remove this, remove this. We are left with only the rows where this is smaller than this. And this is just like they wanted in the question. They wanted us to have 2 columns, person 1 and person 2, that has each pair of people who talked have the smaller ID in the person 1 column. Compare this table that we have now to our input table. Remember how we couldn't group these because it was ordered 3, 4 here, but then it was 4, 3 here? Well, now we flipped this 4, 3 into a 3, 4, and we have 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, and 3, 4. They're all in the same order, and now we can group by these 2 columns to find how many times they called each other, 4 times, and how long their phone calls were, 999 minutes. Again, just to drive the point home, we had 1 and 2 here and 2 and 1 here. We couldn't group these because SQL thought this was one group and then this was another group. But now they are both ordered 1, 2, and 1, 2 here. And now it will group these and give us what we need. So I've been talking a lot. Let's jump into code and implement it so I can show you what I mean by this. First, we're going to select the 2 columns of callers from our calls table. Now what we're going to do is take all of these numbers, 2, 1, 3, 4, 4, 4, 3, and put them in another column below these down here. And then we're going to take these numbers, 1, 2, 1, 3, 3, 3, 4, and attach them in another copy down here below the 2 ID. How do we attach tables vertically, one above the other? We are going to use a union. Union all implies we want to keep duplicates, and we're combining it with the 2 ID column to the from ID column. So we're going to combine from ID, 2 ID, this, and then this below it. And then the 2 ID column, we're going to put the from ID below it. Let's see what it looks like. Perfect. And now here, we're going to remove all the rows where the from ID, this first one, is bigger than the second one. So 1 and 2, keep that. 2 and 1, get rid of that. To do that, we're going to filter where from ID is smaller than 2 ID here. And here we're going to filter where 2 ID is smaller than from ID because these are flipped here. So we're going to flip these around here and perfect. Now we have essentially our input table, but all the people are ordered in the same orientation, right? So that 4, 3 we had, we flipped it around. Now if we just attach the duration of the calls, we have each pair of people who had a phone call and how long that phone call was. So now let's start aggregating on this table. Taking what we have here, for each group of 2 callers, we want to count how many times they had a phone call and put it in this column, and then sum how long their phone calls were. So let's do that. To make it a little clearer, let's give this query we just created a name. For example, organized table, because we just organized everything, so that we don't have to use this query in our code and then make it messy. We can just refer to it as organized table. Now you can imagine this is called organized table. We're going to want to return 4 things. The first person from the phone call, which we'll call person 1. So let's do that. Select the first person and call that person 1. We're also going to want to return the second person and call that person 2. And then we're going to want to count how many calls each 2 people had, right? So we're going to say count the number of rows in the whole table, and we're gonna group by each pair of people, person 1 and person 2. And then lastly, they want us to sum together the time of the phone call, the duration column. So let's sum together how long each phone call was and call it total duration. This table that we're doing this all on, we called it organized table. So we can just say from organized table, and that's it. We're grouping by each pair of people to get how many times those people called and how long each phone call was. Let's run it. Perfect. Our solution so far is accepted. Let's submit. And there you go. It works. Just to go over everything one more time. First, we used a union all to get each pair of callers and made it so that the caller with the smaller ID is before the caller with the bigger ID. And then once we got all of that, we just performed some aggregate functions. We just counted how many rows each pair of people had and then summed up the phone calls for each pair of people. And that's all. Thank you for watching.